Hello and welcome back to Clay English, and I thought it would be interesting to turn the tables on the publishers in the publishing world, because I've been trying to get my book published and most of the time it's rejected very quickly without any feedback, just a standard rejection letter. Gives me no information at all. And so when you do search on the internet as to why books are rejected, you come up with a list of obvious things, and none of which apply to my book. So I thought it would be interesting to look at successful books and see how they got through that first check by the publisher. And so I'm going to pretend to be a publisher whose job it is to reject every book except the exceptional one, which somehow will sneak through. And so I'm going to look at the most successful book from last year, according to the bestsellers list, which is Paul Murray's The Bee Sting, which I actually went as far as buying based on the cover note, which got me attracted. But then when I started reading it, I realized that I'm amazed this book ever got published. And so I'm going to share with you the approach that most publishers do when they read a novel by an unknown writer, i.e. me, rather than a known writer like Paul Murray, and the differential way they treat books. Now, so this is what would happen if a publisher read this book for the first time, or received the manuscript for the first time, didn't know who Paul Murray was, didn't know what a bee sting was, had 100 other books to read before lunchtime, and was looking for a reason to reject it. Okay, so the cover note was very interesting, and that got me to actually open the book. So this is what I'm going to do, and read you the first line. This is the first line, page 1. In the next town over, a man had killed his family. Okay, this is not a good start to a novel for many, many reasons. Firstly, we don't know who this man is. Secondly, we don't know the connection between this man and the main protagonist in the story that's going to come up. And we subsequently discover, in fact, this is completely irrelevant, and I will get to that point perhaps, completely irrelevant to the story. So it's not a good start. In fact, it would put me off because I don't like people being killed in my stories, except exceptionally or as part of the main story. To be told someone has killed his family, like, well, there's no mystery there. We know who did it, we know what happened. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever for saying this at all, particularly as the first line of the novel. So when I first read this book and looked at the first line, I immediately gave up. This line would put me off as a publisher if I was going to read this, regardless. I mean, okay, I have a prejudice against violence. I have a prejudice against people who kill their family. I don't want to read about those sort of stories. It's not interesting. Certainly not to be told it's already happened. Maybe in the book, you know, on page 275, as a result of the previous 274 pages of provocation, then perhaps it might be interesting, or at least part of the story. But to be told this in the first line, this would be an immediate rejection. But let's bear with it and read the second line. He'd nailed the doors shut so they couldn't get out. Okay, look, I don't care about this person. You haven't told me why this person's important. I'm already appalled by the fact you've mentioned it. Now you're giving me even more horrific details, creating an absolutely appalling image in my mind of this cold-blooded murder. There's no mystery here. This is not going to be a murder mystery story. This is not going to be about this family. There isn't any family to be a story about. They're already dead. This is just an appalling start to any novel. And then we carry on. The neighbours heard them running through the room screaming for mercy. It's like, do I really want to know about this? This is creating a horrendous image and will create nightmares in my mind. As a parent, the last thing I want to hear is children running around screaming for mercy. And the fact that the neighbour heard it and didn't do anything about it is even more appalling. It's like, why are you telling me this? Not only is it horrendous and appalling, and we know bad things happen, okay? But I want to read a book that's going to entertain me, enlighten me, inform me, and keep me busy for the next few hours while I read this book. And it's quite a thick book. It would keep me for a few hours. You got to get me into it. What you're doing here is alienating me from day one. None of this is relevant, and all of this is appalling. But I forced myself to read on. When he had finished, he turned the gun on himself. It's like, okay, so there isn't a story here. The guy has committed suicide. He's murdered his family and himself. That's the end of it. It's not relevant to this story. It's not relevant to any story, not as the first line. It could be, perhaps, at the end of the story, or it could be as part of an investigation into a murder mystery, perhaps, where the investigating officers discover this, again on page 275, and then try and build up a picture of why this guy did this, what was going wrong in the family, and so on. But this story, this book, is not about this man's family. Why is this in here at all? It's irrelevant. And it's not like describing how the sun breaks through the clouds, or you can hear the sound of ice cracking as somebody walks past the window, which is setting the atmosphere, if you like, for the story. This is irrelevant. In the next town over, it's not even in this town. It's not even anyone this person knows. And we know that because later on, they say everyone was talking about it. I don't like that. The word everyone, it's not true. I wasn't talking about it. I didn't know about it. Only the people in the story. Don't exaggerate. This is appalling misuse of the language. Just say all her friends were talking about it. But we don't know who is saying everyone was talking about it, about what kind of man could do such a thing, about the secrets he must have had. Rumours swirled about affairs, addiction, hidden files on his computer. None of this is relevant. This person is not connected to the reality of this story. And we find that out with the next line. Elaine just said she was surprised it didn't happen more often. Okay, well, if Elaine is the main protagonist in this story, then you have alienated me already from her by her disregard for the reality of the situation, her dismissal of the actions. And so it's so common, you know, it's no big deal. It's like, this is an appalling act committed in the most appalling of circumstances. And Elaine simply says, I'm not surprised it didn't happen more often. It's like, I hate this Elaine already with a vengeance. She's the wrong sort of person. And if she turns out to be the protagonist in this story, she's just going to have an appalling chip on her shoulder, prejudice from me right from the beginning. And I'm not going to get to like someone who has that attitude towards suicide, mass murder and family problems. It's just appalling. And then she says, she thrust her thumbs through the belt loops of her jeans and looked down the dreary main street of their town. I mean, she said, it's something to do. It's like the picture that those words paint is so miserable, so negative, so depressing. On what possible planet could you get me to read any further? This is the most miserable, negative, destructive, demeaning, appalling, alienating start to a novel you could possibly imagine. There is no way, if I was a publisher, I would ever go near this. And that's probably why I'm not a publisher, and I'm a poor, failed to be published author, because I could not write this crap if you paid me a fortune. There is no way I would start a story like this and expect a publisher to do anything other than that with it. How did that crap get published? Honestly, and why doesn't my story get published? You read my story, you're into the action straight away. It's alive straight away. It's wonderful. It's dramatic. It's fantastic. And you know immediately who the protagonist is, although you don't know what's going to happen. But you want to find out because it's exciting. It connects with you right from the beginning. This alienates you. It alienated me from the beginning. This stuff is not worth using for fish and chip papers. Don't buy it. Paul Murray, The Bee Sting, crap. Thank you. Hopefully my next story will be a bit more positive.